before the feet touch the floor, before the first sip of tea or coffee, before the world asks anything of you, your body is already making decisions about blood sugar. Not conscious decisions, not moral ones, but biological choices written in hormones, nerves, and cells that have been waiting all night for a signal. For people living with diabetes, this quiet window in the morning is not neutral time. It is a lever. Pull it gently in the right direction, and the entire day's glucose story begins to change. There is a moment in the morning, just before consciousness fully gathers itself, when the body is already active in ways we rarely notice. Hormones are shifting, the nervous system is preparing for alertness, and the bloodstream carries signals that have been quietly building throughout the night. For someone living with diabetes, this moment is far more than routine waking. It is a stage upon which glucose regulation begins its daily performance. Blood sugar levels are not simply reactions to food. They are responses to rhythm, anticipation, and biological memory. Understanding this transforms the idea of a morning habit from something optional into something foundational, because the body is already negotiating with energy before the day has begun, and the first action we take becomes a message to every system involved in metabolic balance. When we wake, cortisol naturally rises. This rise is not harmful by design. It is a survival mechanism meant to mobilize energy. The liver responds by releasing glucose, preparing muscles and brain for activity. In people with balanced metabolic systems, insulin sensitivity accommodates this transition smoothly. But in individuals managing diabetes or insulin resistance, the communication between glucose release and glucose usage is less coordinated. The bloodstream fills with fuel that has not yet been directed into purposeful use. This is why fasting readings can feel unpredictable or discouraging, even when dietary discipline has been maintained. The body is not disobedient. It is simply following hormonal instructions that evolved long before modern sedentary mornings existed. This is where the act of intentional movement becomes transformative. Movement at this stage is not about burning calories or chasing cardiovascular metrics. It is about opening molecular doors. Muscle contractions activate glucose transporters that allow sugar to move from blood into tissue independently of insulin's command. It is a direct pathway, elegantly simple, bypassing resistance and inefficiency. When muscles begin to work, they create a demand for fuel, and the glucose circulating in the blood finds immediate purpose. This exchange is not symbolic. It alters measurable physiology within minutes, reducing circulating glucose and improving cellular energy availability without requiring additional pharmacological intervention. What makes the morning uniquely potent for this interaction is sensitivity. The body has just emerged from fasting. Receptors are more responsive, and metabolic pathways are less burdened by dietary variables. Introducing movement at this time aligns with natural endocrine patterns rather than competing against them. Over repeated days, the body learns from this consistency. Liver output becomes more measured, insulin signaling improves incrementally, and mitochondrial efficiency strengthens. These changes are gradual but cumulative, reflecting adaptation rather than temporary correction. This is why the habit influences HbA1c over time, not through dramatic spikes of improvement, but through subtle, repeated recalibration of daily glucose exposure. The psychological dimension of this habit is equally meaningful. Diabetes management often carries emotional weight, particularly around numbers observed first thing in the morning. When the day begins with measurement alone, it can reinforce a sense of passivity, as though health is something assessed rather than shaped. Introducing movement shifts that narrative. The individual participates in regulation before observation. This engagement fosters agency, which reduces stress responses that otherwise elevate cortisol and glucose levels further. Emotional calmness is not separate from metabolic stability. It contributes directly to it, mediated through neuroendocrine pathways that connect perception to physiology. Breathing, often unnoticed, intertwines with movement in shaping this state. Slow, deliberate respiration activates parasympathetic balance, reducing excessive sympathetic drive. In practical terms, this means less unnecessary glucose mobilization and a more grounded cardiovascular response. Oxygenation improves muscular efficiency, and neural signals encourage a steadier hormonal environment. This relationship between breath and glucose might seem abstract, but it manifests tangibly in reduced variability and greater overall stability throughout the day. Each inhalation and exhalation becomes part of the metabolic dialogue, reinforcing harmony between systems that are otherwise prone to conflict under stress. Another layer lies in neurological readiness. The brain relies heavily on glucose, and early movement enhances cerebral circulation and neurotransmitter activity. This improves cognitive clarity and mood regulation, both of which influence dietary choices later in the day. Appetite hormones respond to early activity by stabilizing hunger perception, reducing impulsive consumption patterns. The connection between morning habit and evening glucose control is therefore not coincidental. It is the outcome of cascading behavioral and biochemical effects rooted in early activation of the body's integrative networks. Muscular adaptation deserves contemplation as well. With consistent morning engagement, muscle tissue increases its capacity for glucose storage and oxidation. This is not merely hypertrophy, but functional improvement in metabolic flexibility. Cells become better equipped to transition between fuel sources, reducing prolonged hyperglycemia after meals. Over months, this enhances resilience, allowing the body to handle variability without extreme fluctuations. Such resilience is a quiet architecture behind improved long-term markers, and it emerges from repetition rather than intensity. Time investment remains minimal, which challenges common assumptions about effort and outcome. The effectiveness of the habit arises not from duration, but from alignment. Even brief engagement signals readiness to use available energy. This principle reveals something profound about biology. Systems prioritize synchronization over magnitude. A small action at the correct moment can surpass larger actions taken in metabolic discord. This insight reframes discipline as awareness of timing rather than accumulation of strain. Social and environmental implications extend further. A consistent morning routine often influences household rhythm, exposure to natural light, and sleep-wake regularity. These factors reinforce circadian stability, indirectly supporting glucose regulation. The habit becomes embedded in lifestyle context, shaping patterns beyond the initial minutes of activity. Health emerges as ecosystem rather than isolated event, with each element reinforcing the others through shared timing and intention. Over time, familiarity develops. Movements feel less like intervention and more like greeting the day through physical presence. Measurements taken afterward reflect cooperation already underway. Numbers become feedback rather than verdict, illustrating the body's responsiveness to respectful engagement. There is humility in recognizing that change arises not from domination biology, but from partnership with its tendencies, acknowledging its intelligence and guiding it gently toward equilibrium. In this understanding, the morning habit transcends technique. It becomes philosophy embodied in action, an affirmation that health is cultivated through alignment with natural rhythms rather than imposed through force. Muscles, breath, hormones, and perception converge in a ritual that is both scientific and reflective, grounding abstract metabolic theory in lived experience. Through this lens, improving blood sugar and HbA1c ceases to be solely clinical aspiration and becomes part of broader exploration of how humans coexist with their own physiology, learning daily from the dialogue that unfolds before the world fully awakens, and the day's demands gather momentum, and the quiet internal systems continue their conversation with every step and stretch in breath shaping the unseen current of energy within the living body. There is something profoundly revealing about the first light of morning entering the eyes, not merely as illumination, but as biological instruction. Long before modern medicine described glucose metabolism in precise numbers, the human body evolved to interpret light as a signal of alignment, a cue that informs hormones, neural circuits, and metabolic pathways about the transition from rest activity. For individuals managing blood sugar, this interaction between light and physiology is not poetic metaphor. It is measurable, chemical, and deeply influential. Exposure to natural light in the early morning does more than awaken perception. It resets the circadian clock embedded in the brain, a master regulator that orchestrates insulin sensitivity, appetite signals, and cellular energy processing across the entire day. Within the retina, specialized photoreceptors communicate directly with the hypothalamus, informing the suprachiasmatic nucleus about environmental brightness. This nucleus acts like a conductor, synchronizing peripheral clocks located in the liver, pancreas, and muscle tissue. When synchronization occurs, metabolic processes unfold with efficiency. Insulin secretion becomes more responsive, hepatic glucose output becomes more predictable, and appetite hormones align with genuine energy requirements rather than emotional impulse. When light exposure is delayed or inconsistent, this coordination weakens. The body still functions, but timing loses precision and metabolic signals become less harmonious. Blood sugar variability often reflects not only dietary factors, but also the degree of circadian alignment experienced at dawn. The act of stepping outdoors, even briefly, creates a cascade of neurological responses that stabilize mood and cognition. Serotonin synthesis increases with light exposure, and this neurotransmitter influences behavioral regulation throughout the day. Emotional steadiness reduces stress-driven eating and moderates cortisol fluctuations, indirectly affecting glucose levels. There is elegance in recognizing how perception shapes physiology. Seeing the morning clearly can alter metabolic outcomes hours later. This relationship emphasizes that health is not confined to digestion or circulation, but arises from sensory engagement with environment, reinforcing the interconnected nature of human biology. Vitamin D synthesis, initiated through sunlight interaction with skin, contributes further layers of metabolic support. Though gradual in its accumulation, adequate levels correlate with improved insulin function and inflammatory balance. The process itself reminds us that the body participates in chemical creation through interaction with surroundings, not solely through internal mechanisms. Each exposure represents cooperation between organism and atmosphere, illustrating the continuity between individual physiology and planetary rhythms. Such awareness invites a broader perspective on well-being, encouraging individuals to see themselves not as isolated systems, but as participants within ecological cycles that sustain biochemical equilibrium. Walking during this period adds movement to illumination, merging sensory and muscular activation. Circulation improves, distributing oxygen and nutrients more efficiently. The pancreas and liver, receiving enriched blood flow, operate within environments conducive to stability. Muscles gently engaged enhance glucose uptake, reinforcing the metabolic adjustments initiated by circadian signaling. This combination transforms a simple routine into layered intervention, addressing endocrine balance, cardiovascular function, and psychological resilience simultaneously. Complexity unfolds beneath simplicity, revealing the depth contained within ordinary acts. There is philosophical significance embedded in these observations. Modern lifestyles often prioritize artificial light, confined interiors, and digital stimulation, separating humans from cues that shape biological evolution. Reintroducing natural light exposure is not regression but restoration, reconnecting physiological patterns with ancestral continuity. The resulting metabolic improvements suggest that innovation and tradition need not oppose one another. Scientific understanding validates practices rooted in natural interaction. The lesson extends beyond glucose management, illustrating how alignment with environment cultivates systemic harmony across multiple domains of health. Consistency magnifies impact. The circadian clock responds not to isolated exposure, but to repeated signaling. Each morning encounter with light reinforces neural pathways, stabilizing hormonal rhythms. Over weeks, this stability manifests in improved sleep onset at night, further enhancing glucose regulation through restorative rest. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing, demonstrating feedback loops intrinsic to living systems. Cause and effect blur into ongoing dialogue, where small habits echo across temporal scales, influencing outcomes far removed from their origin. Social dimensions intertwine subtly as well. Morning routines that include outdoor presence often encourage mindfulness and reflection, moments free from immediate obligation. Such pauses cultivate mental clarity, reducing reactive stress responses that elevate glucose levels through sympathetic activation. The connection between psychological state and metabolic measurement reminds us that numbers on a monitor reflect narratives unfolding within consciousness as much as within tissue. Health thus encompasses emotional awareness, acknowledging that internal experience participates in shaping biochemical reality. Urban environments present challenges, yet also opportunities. Even brief balcony exposure or light through open windows contributes meaningful signals to the circadian system. Adaptation becomes creative rather than defeated, emphasizing that perfection is unnecessary for benefit. Recognizing this flexibility empowers individuals to engage with circumstances rather than withdrawing from effort. Scientific literacy transforms limitation into exploration, encouraging observation of subtle improvements that reinforce commitment to routine. As understanding deepens, appreciation grows for the integration of sensory, neurological, and metabolic functions. Light is not passive backdrop, but active participant in biological regulation. Each photon entering the eye carries potential influence over endocrine timing, behavioral choice, and glucose stability. The simplicity of exposure conceals intricate molecular choreography, inviting humility toward the complexity operating within daily experience. By embracing this awareness, individuals cultivate partnership with processes often overlooked, fostering trust in the body's responsiveness to gentle guidance. Through repeated mornings, perception shifts. Light becomes conversation rather than scenery. Movement becomes cooperation rather than obligation, and metabolic health reveals itself as dynamic interplay rather than static condition. The routine unfolds quietly yet persistently, shaping physiology through synchronization rather than force. Encouraging a lived understanding that the path toward stable blood sugar is illuminated not only by medication or restriction, but by engagement with the natural signals that greet the eyes at dawn and continue to influence every internal rhythm as the day unfolds and awareness expands alongside the steady interplay of light and life within the living system. There is an often overlooked conversation taking place inside the body during the first nourishment of the day, a dialogue between digestion, hormones, and cellular expectation that determines far more than momentary satisfaction. When someone living with diabetes considers breakfast, the focus is frequently placed on avoidance, on calculating what must not be consumed. Yet biology responds more profoundly to what is provided with intention. The composition of the first meal becomes a signal that informs insulin response, inflammatory balance, and even cognitive steadiness for hours afterward. Food is not merely intake. It is instruction delivered in molecular form, shaping how the bloodstream carries energy and how tissues interpret its arrival. After waking, insulin sensitivity varies depending on circadian timing, stress state, and activity level. Introducing refined carbohydrates abruptly into this environment can overwhelm signaling pathways, leading to rapid glucose elevation followed by compensatory hormonal adjustments that may produce fatigue or craving. But when nourishment begins with fiber, protein, and moderate healthy fats, the physiological landscape shifts. Digestion slows, glucose absorption becomes gradual, and pancreatic response aligns with demand rather than reacting to sudden surges. This moderation is not deprivation. It is orchestration, guiding energy distribution with calm precision rather than allowing chaos to dictate metabolic outcomes. Fiber occupies a particularly elegant role in this process. Within the gastrointestinal tract, soluble fibers interact with water to form viscous structures that delay carbohydrate breakdown. This mechanical influence translates into biochemical stability, preventing abrupt glucose release into circulation. Simultaneously, fermentation of fiber by gut microbiota produces short-chain fatty acids that enhance insulin sensitivity and reduce systemic inflammation. These microbial contributions highlight that metabolic health is collective rather than solitary, involving symbiotic communities whose well-being reflects dietary patterns. A thoughtfully composed breakfast nourishes not only the individual, but also these microscopic partners, reinforcing cooperation that manifests in improved glycemic control. Protein, often undervalued in morning meals, stabilizes hormonal responses through stimulation of satiety signals, such as peptide YY and glucagon-like peptide activity. These messengers influence appetite perception later in the day, reducing impulsive intake that might destabilize glucose patterns. Moreover, amino acids derived from protein contribute to tissue repair and neurotransmitter synthesis, affecting mood and cognitive clarity. The interconnectedness becomes evident. What supports muscle and mind simultaneously contributes to metabolic steadiness, illustrating how bodily systems rarely operate in isolation. Each nutrient participates in multiple pathways, weaving together structural, neurological, and endocrine integrity. Healthy fats contribute yet another dimension, extending digestive pacing, and supporting cellular membrane composition. Their presence reduces rapid gastric emptying, sustaining energy release while providing substrates for anti-inflammatory signaling molecules. Such biochemical subtleties often escape conscious awareness, yet they shape how comfortably glucose circulates within acceptable ranges. Incorporating these elements does not complicate life, but simplifies internal negotiation, allowing the body to function within parameters it evolved to manage effectively. The act of mindful consumption enhances physiological benefit beyond macronutrient balance. Eating slowly, attending to texture and taste, activates parasympathetic pathways that optimize digestive enzyme secretion and nutrient assimilation. Stress-driven haste disrupts these mechanisms, impairing absorption and potentially exacerbating glycemic variability. Thus, the emotional environment surrounding breakfast becomes inseparable from its biochemical impact. Presence and attentiveness transform a meal into an integrated metabolic event rather than a mechanical routine, reinforcing the idea that health unfolds through awareness as much as through composition. Hydration accompanying nourishment also influences outcomes. Water initiates gastrointestinal readiness and supports circulatory distribution of absorbed nutrients. Even mild dehydration can concentrate blood glucose readings, complicating interpretation and physiological balance. Recognizing such subtleties encourages respect for foundational needs often overshadowed by complex interventions. Simplicity frequently underlies effectiveness, reminding us that foundational biological requirements deserve priority. Over time, patterns established in the morning imprint themselves upon metabolic expectation. Regularly balanced nourishment trains hormonal responses toward predictability, reducing exaggerated fluctuations. This consistency contributes to improved long-term indicators, such as HbA1c, not through dramatic shift but through cumulative steadiness. The principle echoes broader truths within physiology. Stability emerges from repetition of supportive behaviors rather than isolated acts of intensity. There is philosophical resonance in observing how nourishment reflects relationship with self. Choosing foods that sustain equilibrium expresses respect for bodily processes and acknowledgement of interdependence between awareness and biology. The meal becomes ritual, embodying intention toward longevity and vitality. Through this lens, breakfast transcends utility, becoming affirmation that care for oneself is enacted through daily, tangible gestures that align perception with physiology. Social contexts further shape this experience. Shared meals, conversation, and environmental calmness contribute emotional grounding that modulates hormonal state. Stress reduction accompanying supportive interaction influences glucose regulation through neuroendocrine pathways, illustrating again how psychological and metabolic health intertwine. Community and companionship thus participate indirectly in glycemic stability, reinforcing holistic understanding of well-being. As individuals explore these dynamics, they often discover empowerment in understanding rather than restriction. Knowledge reframes dietary choice as creative engagement with biological potential. The body responds appreciatively to thoughtful composition, adapting gradually toward efficiency. Such adaptation reveals resilience inherent in human physiology, encouraging trust in its capacity to improve through partnership rather than coercion. With each morning, the act of nourishing becomes conversation renewed, shaping microbial harmony, hormonal pacing, and neural clarity through mindful provision of balanced sustenance. The bloodstream carries not only glucose but information encoded in nutrients, informing tissues how to respond, adapt, and maintain equilibrium. Observing this unfolding interaction invites reverence for complexity hidden within ordinary routines, demonstrating that managing blood sugar involves cultivating relationships among digestion, perception, and intention that continue evolving quietly beneath awareness as each meal participates in guiding the living system toward balance and responsiveness within the intricate continuity of daily life. There is a quiet influence on blood sugar that rarely receives attention because it cannot be measured by calories, steps, or visible exertion. It moves through the body as electrical impulse and chemical whisper, shaping glucose levels through perception, thought, and emotional response. Stress is often discussed as a feeling, yet biologically it is an orchestrated cascade involving the nervous system and endocrine glands, capable of altering metabolic balance within minutes. For individuals navigating diabetes, Recognizing stress as a physiological force rather than an abstract mood reveals an opportunity to influence blood sugar not only through physical action, but through conscious regulation of the mind's relationship with experience. When stress arises, the sympathetic nervous system initiates protective preparation. Adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol, hormones designed to mobilize energy reserves for survival. The liver responds by releasing glucose into the bloodstream, ensuring muscles and brain have immediate fuel. This response evolved in contexts where physical exertion followed emotional alarm, yet modern stress often lacks corresponding movement. The glucose remains circulating without utilization, leading to elevations that seem unrelated to food intake. Understanding this mechanism dissolves confusion and self-blame, reframing unexpected readings as natural outcomes of neural signaling rather than personal failure. Breathing becomes a gateway into altering this cascade. Slow, controlled respiration stimulates vagal pathways associated with parasympathetic dominance, counterbalancing sympathetic activation. The heart rate steadies, cortisol output diminishes, and metabolic signaling regains composure. This interaction illustrates the remarkable accessibility of influence over physiology. Intentional breath alters internal chemistry through neural circuitry that evolve for adaptive flexibility. Practicing such awareness in the morning establishes resilience that persists through the day, moderating hormonal fluctuations that might otherwise destabilize glucose control. Meditative stillness further deepens this recalibration. Allowing the mind to observe thoughts without immediate reaction reduces habitual activation of stress pathways. Neuroimaging studies revealed decreased amygdala reactivity and strengthened prefrontal regulation among those who cultivate reflective presence. These neurological shifts translate into endocrine steadiness, reinforcing glucose stability indirectly yet powerfully. The mind's training thus becomes metabolic intervention, reminding us that biological boundaries between psychological and physical domains are porous rather than absolute. Movement integrated with mindfulness enhances this process. Gentle stretching or walking performed with attentive awareness combines muscular glucose uptake with emotional regulation. Muscles consume circulating sugar while the mind releases unnecessary tension, addressing metabolic balance from dual directions. Such integration exemplifies synergy within human systems, where layered benefits arise from unified action rather than isolated techniques. The elegance of this cooperation invites appreciation for the body's design, capable of responding harmoniously when given aligned signals. Sleep quality, shaped by evening stress patterns, also interacts with morning glucose regulation. Restorative sleep supports hormonal equilibrium, whereas fragmented rest elevates inflammatory markers and insulin resistance. Addressing stress before sleep, therefore, becomes preparation for metabolic stability upon waking. The continuity between night and morning underscores how health unfolds across temporal boundaries, emphasizing sustained attentiveness rather than segmented intervention. Each day's beginning reflects processes initiated long before consciousness returned. Community and communication influence stress modulation as well. Sharing concerns, expressing gratitude, or engaging in supportive dialogue activates neural circuits associated with safety and belonging. Oxytocin release counteracts stress hormone effects, fostering emotional calmness, and indirectly supporting glucose balance. These social dimensions highlight that interpersonal connection contributes biologically to health outcomes, expanding understanding beyond individual effort toward relational ecosystems shaping physiology. Digital environments introduce additional layers of stimulation capable of sustaining sympathetic activation. Continuous exposure to alerts, news, or comparison-driven content maintains vigilant states incompatible with metabolic calmness. Establishing boundaries around such inputs in the morning preserves neurological clarity and hormonal steadiness. Choosing moments of quiet reflection before engaging with external demands protects the delicate transition from rest activity, ensuring glucose levels are not influenced by unnecessary psychological agitation. Over time, cultivating stress awareness transforms perception of control. Rather than reacting unconsciously, individuals recognize early signals and intervene through breath, movement, or reframing. This responsiveness reduces cumulative hormonal impact, gradually reflecting in improved glycemic patterns and overall vitality. The process embodies partnership between consciousness and physiology, demonstrating that knowledge and practice reshape internal environments through subtle yet persistent guidance. There is philosophical depth within this realization. The body mirrors experience, translating thoughts into chemical language that shapes physical outcomes. Accepting responsibility for emotional stewardship does not impose burden, but invites empowerment, offering tools accessible without equipment or expense. Presence, breath, and reflection become instruments of care, aligning mental intention with biological need. Such alignment cultivates respect for complexity inherent in being human, encouraging humility alongside curiosity. In witnessing these interactions, one begins to see health as dialogue between sensation and response, between environment and interpretation. Blood sugar readings become reflections not only of diet or medication, but of lived moments shaped by awareness or attention. Recognizing this multidimensional influence encourages compassion toward oneself, replacing judgment with exploration. Each morning offers opportunity to engage consciously with neural rhythms and hormonal tides, nurturing balance through attentive participation that continues evolving as understanding deepens. An internal conversation between mind and metabolism unfolds quietly through breath and perception and calm engagement with the unfolding day. There is a dimension of metabolic health that unfolds gradually, almost invisibly, to the architecture of routine itself. It is neither dramatic nor immediate, yet its influence permeates every measurement and sensation experienced over time. The body is an adaptive system, learning from repetition and expectation, and nowhere is this learning more evident than in how consistent daily rhythms reshape glucose regulation. For individuals seeking natural improvement in blood sugar and HbA1c, the recognition that stability arises from predictable patterns rather than isolated interventions becomes transformative. It invites attention not only to what is done, but to when and how regularly it is done, because physiology thrives on timing as much as on substance. Circadian biology underlies this phenomenon. Cells across organs maintain internal clocks that anticipate environmental change, preparing metabolic pathways for cycles of feeding, fasting, rest, and activity. When routines align with these cycles, enzymatic efficiency increases and hormonal communication becomes coherent. Insulin signaling synchronizes with nutrient intake, liver glucose production adjusts appropriately, and inflammatory processes remain moderated. When routines fluctuate unpredictably, clocks lose coordination, producing metabolic noise that manifests as irregular glycemic response. Thus, consistency itself functions as intervention, restoring harmony within systems that evolve for rhythmic living. The act of waking at similar times establishes the first anchor of this alignment. Hormonal cascades begin to anticipate awakening, reducing abrupt cortisol spikes and supporting smoother glucose transitions. Likewise, predictable sleep onset nurtures restorative processes governing tissue repair and insulin sensitivity. Sleep is not passive absence of wakefulness. It is active recalibration, consolidating memory, balancing neurotransmitters, and modulating immune activity. Each night of stable rest reinforces metabolic readiness the following day, illustrating continuity between darkness and light in shaping biochemical equilibrium. Meal timing further reinforces circadian communication. Consuming nourishment at consistent intervals informs digestive and endocrine systems of expected demand, allowing anticipatory preparation rather than reactive adjustment. This preparation improves glucose handling and reduces postprandial volatility. Skipped or erratic meals introduce uncertainty, compelling the body to operate defensively, often amplifying fluctuations. Observing how predictability nurtures calm responsiveness within physiology encourages appreciation for routine, not as constraint, but as supportive structure enabling efficiency. Physical activity woven consistently into daily life compounds these benefits. Muscular engagement performed regularly trains tissues to expect and utilize glucose effectively. Mitochondrial density improves, vascular elasticity increases, and receptor sensitivity strengthens through adaptation. This adaptation reflects memory encoded within cells, demonstrating that biology records behavior and adjusts accordingly. The resulting resilience manifests as steadier readings and greater physical vitality, outcomes achieved not through extraordinary exertion, but through dependable practice. Environmental cues also participate in routine shaping. Exposure to natural light, temperature variation, and spatial familiarity reinforces circadian signals guiding metabolic readiness. Even subtle habits, such as morning hydration or brief outdoor presence, accumulate influence through repetition. The body integrates these cues into its predictive models, aligning internal timing with external reality. Health emerges from this integration, emphasizing that surroundings and actions together form context for physiological learning. Psychological stability benefits, as well. Predictable routines reduce cognitive load associated with decision-making, conserving mental energy and lowering stress activation. Emotional calmness preserves hormonal balance conducive to glucose regulation, illustrating synergy between mental order and metabolic steadiness. Routine thus nurtures both psychological clarity and physical balance, bridging domains often considered separate. Social rhythms intersect here too. Shared schedules with family or community reinforce accountability and emotional connection, factors influencing adherence and well-being. Human physiology evolved within cooperative environments, and collective patterns support individual regulation. Participating in shared meals or activities embeds health behaviors within relational frameworks, enriching both metabolic and emotional resilience. Technological integration presents modern complexity. Devices enable monitoring and reminders that strengthen consistency when used thoughtfully, yet excessive stimulation disrupts rest and attention. Navigating this balance reflects contemporary adaptation, blending ancient biological rhythms with modern tools. Success lies not in rejecting innovation, but in aligning it with circadian respect, ensuring technology serves stability rather than undermining it. Over extended periods, the cumulative effect of routine reveals itself in measurable outcomes. HbA1c values shift gradually, reflecting months of moderated exposure to elevated glucose. These changes affirm principle that small, sustained alignment reshapes systemic behavior. Patience becomes essential, recognizing that biological remodeling unfolds through continuity rather than immediacy. Each day contributes incrementally, reinforcing trajectories invisible in isolation yet powerful in aggregate. Philosophically, routine invites reflection on identity and discipline. Repetition transforms action into character, embedding intention within daily existence. Caring for metabolic balance becomes expression of respect for the body's intelligence, acknowledging interdependence between consciousness and cellular function. This perspective reframes routine from obligation into relationship, honoring dialogue between habit and health. Through such awareness, individuals begin to perceive time itself as therapeutic dimension. Morning rituals, consistent nourishment, regular movement, and restful nights interlace in a tapestry, sustaining equilibrium. Blood sugar becomes not adversary, but indicator of harmony or discord within this tapestry. Observing patterns encourages curiosity and compassion rather than judgment, deepening engagement with personal physiology. As days accumulate, routine ceases to feel repetitive and instead reveals subtle variation within constancy, teaching patience and attentiveness toward the body's evolving responses. Stability grows from this devotion to rhythm, guiding glucose gently toward balance while fostering understanding that transformation is not dramatic conquest, but gradual alignment with natural cycles that continue shaping perception and biology together through ongoing participation in the living cadence of daily existence.